such thought since the rain had already put out what few flames there were. Now, if anyone were to ever wonder what happened to the old watermill, such a question would remain a new pewter city mystery forever. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Ash, I had no idea it would get so out of hand. Flint sincerely gave his apology a short time later after they dropped Pikachu off at the Pokémon Center for an examination by Nurse Joy. They had only told her that he had been struck by lightning in the storm, though not how it occurred specifically. While Pikachu truly hadn't shown any signs of injury, by the time they reached the center he had fallen asleep in Ash's arms. Which was understandable given the intense strain his small body had just been put through. Now, with Misty in tow, Ash and Flint were taking an evening stroll through the city while waiting for Pikachu. The latter had formally given his words of apology to the former and the boy only shook his head. It wasn't your fault, Flint, there was no way any of us could predict how that would end. I'm just glad Pikachu is safe and everything. It'll be interesting to see if that power-up did anything for him. At that, Misty spoke up. Excuse me, Flint, I don't mean to change the subject, but why are we leaving the city and getting into what looks like the outer housing suburbs? Indeed they were too. The larger buildings and busy streets of the city had gradually given way to nice, quiet, peaceful households and family dwellings that were all neat, tidy and well maintained. However, after a time of walking and ending up on the far outskirts of town where there were few homes, Ash's eye was caught by a large building nearby. He couldn't see the detail of it well, but it appeared to be shaped a little like a big warehouse bunker. It seemed to have blue outer walls, a pinkish-purple roof, and the front of the building was shaped into a very unique design. Namely, it was made up of several different pieces of finely cut stone, some small and others gigantic. They were literally fitted and crafted together straight into the frontward-facing wall of the building, and there were also light brown painted steel beams set into the stone frame. The door that led into the building was also made of light brown painted metal, and it had two sides to it. Pointing to the building since he could just barely make out what looked like lettering carved into the big stone slab above the door, Ash asked curiously. Hey Flint, what is that building? Without breaking his stride, the man answered in his gruff tone. That would be the Pewter City Gym, you haven't seen it yet. The boy shook his head. No, we've been busy training ever since we got here. Flint didn't say anything else but continued to lead them on, down the road and past the gym for just a few hundred feet until they saw the lights of a house directly in front of them. Before long they found themselves standing in front of a large house in the middle of a field that had large rocks, trees and bushes dotted around the property. The house itself had a solid, gray stone foundation and white sheetrock siding. The roof had a standard peaked shape and was colored bright red. The front door was made of fine yellow tanned wood and had a long red roofed overhang suspended above it. The door itself seemed like it led into an entryway that also sported a red roof and had a single round window in the center of it. Beyond that was the first large area of the house, and it had another round window at the top with two narrow ones down below it. There was also a yellow section of siding beside the two small, rectangular windows that had another identical pair of windows set into it. Below the yellow square of siding was a red overhang roof that stretched out above a glass wall with a sliding door built into it. Around the side of the house there was a normal double glass window, and up on the roof was a small open section with yet another window. Although that particular one most likely led into an upstairs bedroom. The third divided section of the home was the largest by far and likely served as the main living area of the house. It had two sets of windows down on the ground floor, on the east side, and two more on the far west end. On the east-facing portion of the house, up on the roof, there was yet another large open alcove. This as well led to a large rectangular window, which probably also led to another upstairs bedroom. The entire perimeter of the large house was girded by a gray property fence, and within the yard itself there were planted trees and rows of neatly trimmed bushes. Oddly enough, there was a strange raised plateau of land to the west of the house, but it didn't detract from the quaint, neat and homely feel it projected. However, what really caught the eye of Ash and Misty was what they were able to see through the sliding glass door that was near the front door. At present, since it was a warm evening, the glass door was open, allowing them to see inside to what must have been the dining room and kitchen. Both were quite large, and from the furnishing and design of the home, it didn't look to belong to a poor family. Not a wealthy one either, but definitely not a poor family. In the dining room, seated around a big square table and even on the floor, were the biggest group of identical-looking children that Ash and Misty had ever seen. They appeared to range in multiple age groups as well, from young children no older than 5 or 6, to a few older ones who seemed to be between the ages of 8 and 12. Some of the youngest children were playing with toys down on the large red rug near the table, while a few of the others were seated at the table itself. It seemed that a few of the older ones were either helping the younger kids with different tasks, teaching them something, or playing with them. By Ash's count, there were at least 9 children in the dining room. Each one was wearing a different outfit, had a slightly different hair color and or style, and a few of them even had faintly lighter or darker skin tone than the other. However, one common trait that they all shared and made them very noticeable as siblings were the identically squinty eyes each one possessed. As they continued to look inside of the home that Flint had apparently intended to bring them to, Ash and Misty soon spotted someone standing in the kitchen at the sink. The person in question was obviously a young man by his build and easily the oldest of anyone they had seen thus far due to his height alone. Although they couldn't see the front of him, they were able to see what he looked like from behind. The young man had dark brown hair that stood up in a messy spike all across the top of his head. From behind, it looked like he was wearing a dark brown pair of pants with a black belt around the waist. He was also wearing a beige t-shirt. Soon, they saw a little girl with long, dark purple hair dressed in a dark red dress and a light green undershirt run up to the boy at the sink. Pulling at his pants leg, she spoke in a plaintive, distraught tone. "Big brother, please sew my dolly for me. Its dress ripped." The 2 peeking young trainers saw the boy turn around, and it was easy to see that he was related to the other children since his eyes were just as squinty as their own. Moreover, he appeared to be somewhere between the age of 14 and 16. From the front, they could see that he was also wearing a white apron over the front of his shirt. Though, what drew their attention the most was how he smiled kindly at the little girl and then knelt down to her level to speak softly to her. "Okay, don't worry, I'll sew it up for you." He then left the still sizable mound of dishes in the sink, which looked to be post-supper, and walked into the dining room. Sitting on the floor amongst the other children, he directed one of the older kids to get him something while the little girl that pleaded for his help placed a small doll into his lap. Before long, a girl with reddish-brown hair, appearing to be a year or so younger than Ash, ran back into the dining from somewhere in the house holding a red sewing kit. She was wearing a white dress with pink hearts on both sides of the chest. Within seconds, the young man had the sewing kit open, selected a needle and thread and began working on mending the torn doll in his lap. All while the little girl sat next to him looking teary and worried at the operation she was currently witnessing. "Flint, what is this?" Ash finally spoke up as he looked over at the older man. "Why did you bring us here?" The bearded rock merchant, who had not taken his eyes off the scene playing before them since arriving, replied forthwith. "That young man you see in there sewing the doll, that's the Pewter City gym leader, Brock Stone." Ash and Misty's eyes both widened. "What?" He nodded. "Those kids you see in there are all his younger brothers and sisters, and he takes care of them all, by himself." Their shock remained as they turned back to see that 2 even littler kids were now kneeling next to him as well and kept asking their older brother to read them a story. However, instead of getting upset or frustrated at being demanded so much of at one time, Brock just smiled and agreed to do it as soon as he finished sewing the doll. He takes care of them by himself?" Misty asked like she couldn't believe it. Flint nodded once again. "Yes. He takes care of his little siblings, manages the entire household and provides for them exclusively off of what he makes as the full-time gym leader of this city." After saying that, Flint simply turned around and started walking down the road away from the house. Ash and Misty followed, and after catching up, the former asked once they were a good distance from the house. So why does Brock take care of all his little siblings like that? Why doesn't their parents do it? The bearded man looked straight ahead down the road as he answered. They don't have any. Their good-for-nothing father left them years ago and their mother tried to keep everything going but. He paused for a moment and his voice seemed to become emotional for just a split second. But she eventually got sick and passed away. Why did their father leave? Misty curiously inquired. Yeah, and how do you know so much about Brock and his family? Ash asked suspiciously. Reaching a bench that was along the side of the road, Flint sat down on it with a sigh. That's because. He then reached up and, in an act that shocked Ash and Misty, he removed the red hat he was wearing, along with his beard. Revealing that it had been a fake. I am their good-for-nothing father. The two kids stared at him in a mixture of disbelief and amazement. The truth was hard to deny though. Save for looking a lot older and more weathered in the skin and hair, Flint looked the spitting image of Brock. Right down to the spiky dark hair and thin eyes. But, Misty stammered with a pointed finger. How? Yeah, you're Brock's father. Ash exclaimed with wide eyes. Why didn't you tell us that before? Flint simply sighed and rested his elbows upon his knees. Well, to be honest, that's the whole reason I battled with you and showed you a way to make your Pikachu stronger. Seeing the boy's confusion, Flint explained. You see, I left when Brock was only 12 years old. I used to work at a stone quarry outside of town and for a long time, me and my wife Lisa were happy with the way our lives were. He furrowed his brow. But once we started having more and more children, it started getting harder to make it financially. Even though my wife used to be a famous TV chef, she had to retire from it after we began having our children. She still got royalties, but when you have several children, it goes fast. And I didn't make much working at the quarry. At that, Ash looked surprised and held up his finger. Wait a minute, Lisa, cooking star, are you saying your wife was Lisa Stone? Flint looked at the young trainer and nodded before replying in a fond but somewhat remorse tone. Yes, she was. Why do you ask? The boy gestured at himself. My mom was a huge fan of your wife. When she and my dad first got married, it was her cooking videos and books that helped teach my mom how to cook. She then taught me what she knew before I left to go on my journey. Flint offered a small, amused smile and chuckled. Small world Well, I'm glad to hear Lisa made such a difference in your own family's life. His eyes went back to the ground again as he turned somber once more. She was good that way. Sensing the shift of mood, Misty tried to steer the conversation back on track. So you were talking about how you didn't make much at the quarry, Flint. Getting jarred out of his sorrowful thoughts about his wife, the squinty-eyed man got back on focus and continued his tale. Right. So as I was saying, I wasn't making much money at the quarry and Lisa was staying home with the kids. So, we talked it over and I decided to try my hand at becoming a successful Pokémon trainer. He held his hand out and expounded further. Before me and Lisa met, I had aspirations of becoming a trainer in my youth. I already even had the Pokémon I battled Ash with today when I met her. But when we decided to get married and raise a family, I gave up that dream and went into the quarry business. As if recalling long-made wishes of what could have been, he looked up at the moon. I hoped that by leaving home and doubling up on my training, I might be able to win 8 badges with my Pokémon and even enter the Indigo League conference. My hope was to win that tournament, take the prize money and come back home to start up my own stone-cutting business. I figured if I could do that, then our family's money troubles would be over forever. A small sigh escaped his lips. But it didn't happen that way. We couldn't manage to make our way into the Indigo Conference, and before I knew it, almost a whole year had passed. I simply lost track of time. I was so focused on making my Pokémon stronger so we could win and achieve our goal that I lost sight of everything else. I didn't call or check in with my family very regularly, and most times I couldn't. Eventually I got a call and found out Lisa had fallen ill with a rare and aggressive disease that quickly took her life. I was completely devastated, my entire world fell apart. He reached up at that to rub 2 fingers into his eyes. I immediately decided to come home and be there for my children, but when I came back, I found out that Brock had become certified as an official gym leader in the one short year I had been gone. While his mother was sick, he opened up his gym, quickly became a successful leader, and was providing for our family with the income he made from it better than I ever could. Misty frowned. So why didn't you go back to them then? Flint himself frowned deeply. Because I was a coward. I was afraid Brock and my other children would hate me for being away while their mother was sick and blame me for her death. Not that I would have blamed them. His head dropped a little lower. When I found all this out, I was scared of facing my family, but I also came up with a plan. I convinced myself that I would stay in the area and train my Pokémon as hard as I could. Then, I was going to show myself to Brock and my family and offer to take over gym duties from him by becoming a certified leader myself. A look of powerful shame crossed his face. So I built my small cabin, started selling rocks to tourists, and began training my Pokémon. I didn't intend for it to take long, but eventually a whole other year passed until I ended up where I am right now. I haven't seen my family in 2 long years, and they're only a few short minutes away. Flint's shoulder drooped as well. I told myself it was just to make sure I was ready to take the reins from Brock as gym leader, but really, I was just scared. Scared of their judgment, scared of their hatred, scared of what they would think of me. My shame, guilt and fear kept me away from my family all this time, and I'm even more ashamed to admit it. Finally, he looked up again. Brock is very talented, and his skills could take him much farther than simply being a local gym leader, even if it has become one of the main 8 in Kanto. He needs to see the world and stretch his wings in order to grow, and after all I've saddled him with for 2 years, I want to be able to give my son the chance he so desperately deserves. Ash looked at Misty and then rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I appreciate you telling us all this, Flint, but why did you? I mean, why did you take an interest in us, in me? Why did you want to battle me and do what you did for Pikachu? The older man looked at him. Because in you I finally saw a chance, Ash. Seeing the boy's puzzled look, he explained. When I first saw you, I thought you were just a jumped-up newbie that had high hopes but no talent to back it up. But after watching you train and then battling you myself, I saw that you have real skill and potential. The boy seemed surprised at his praise, but he went on. You don't remind me of myself at all when I first started out. You seem to have your act together and you know what you're doing. I think you might just be able to help me. Ash gestured at himself. Me? But how can I help you? Flint crossed his arms. If you can defeat Brock, then I'll reveal myself to him and tell him everything I just told you. I'll offer to take the gym from him and be the father to my children that I always should have been. It'll give him a chance to finally go fulfill his own dreams. Ash still seemed a little surprised at what he just heard, but eventually, he smiled and shrugged. That's it. Well, if that's all you need me to do, then of course I'll help Flint. I was already gonna challenge Brock anyway, this just gives me a better reason to do so. Misty smiled as well and spoke up. Yeah, I think it's really great you want to finally reconnect with your family, Flint. If Ash wouldn't be battling, then I would do it myself just to try and help you out. The older man seemed a little taken aback himself by the willing kindness both kids demonstrated in agreeing to help him, but he couldn't deny that it touched his heart. Thus, with a small smile touching his lips, he bowed his head in gratitude. Thank you, both of you. You have no idea what this means to me. Ash grinned and clenched his fist. You just wait, Flint. By the end of the week we'll challenge Brock and we'll beat him. And you'll have a chance to get your family back. The dark-haired, squinty-eyed man felt his heart warm at the determined young boy's passionate and selfless proclamation and nodded. Yes, he knew Ash wanted to win his first gym badge, but he could also now see a fire in the young trainer's eyes to help him as well. And that seemed to give Ash even more determination to achieve victory. Feeling a sense of self-assured ease that maybe the boy before him could actually help get him back together with his family, Flint felt hope kindle in his belly for the first time in years. After a full week of solid and grueling training, Ash stood before the doors of the Pewter City Gym with Misty at his right side, Flint on his left, and Pikachu sitting atop his shoulder. Since it was daylight, the boy was able to see the gym clearly, and the front of it did indeed seem like it was made of the finest slabs of neatly cut stone. Though, as Ash looked at the large double doors before him, he reflected on how far his Pokémon had come in their week of training. While all of them had made solid improvements and strident gains in overall power and skill, Pikachu especially had made the most amazing gains. While the little yellow electric type has always been unusually powerful and strong for his young age and species, Flint's power upgrade plan had boosted Pikachu's electrical power from impressive to astounding. While it took a day or two to help him learn to control all the massive extra amounts of electricity in his body, Pikachu had quickly adapted and adjusted. In many ways it was almost as if he were a little rechargeable battery that never ran out and had an endless reservoir that couldn't be filled. His electrical attacks from Thundershock to Thunderbolt HAD increased in outright volt power by several times their original intensity, which was almost unnerving given how strong they had already been before the power upgrade he received. While Ash knew that the watermill generator had definitely played a very large part in Pikachu's increase in power, he believed the lightning bolt that struck him at the end had done the most. After all, Pikachu had practically summoned down the lightning onto him by putting off all the electricity he had been discharging, which essentially turned him into a small yellow lightning rod. Ash's assumption was that all the power from the generator, combined with the lightning bolt, had filled him with more power than even a dozen other Pikachu combined would be able to produce by themselves. Though amazingly, he hadn't been negatively affected by it. Even while at the Pokémon Center being examined by Nurse Joy, Pikachu showed no signs of ill side effects. Aside from a relentless sparking at his cheeks and a faint yellow aura glowing around him occasionally, which only lasted about 2 days, he had been totally fine. Of course, one thing that could have been considered unfortunate was how Ash had to keep him away from electrical appliances or anything else that took electricity during those 2 days. Any time Pikachu was around something of the sort, it would either cause the appliances themselves to turn on and go haywire or shut down completely. Which was the case with lamp and ceiling lights, they would flicker madly before eventually turning off altogether. A few had even popped when Joy initially examined him. Aside from that and Pikachu needing to regain control over his overall volt power, everything had went relatively smoothly. The only thing Ash worried about now was his first Pokémon using too strong of an electrical attack on an opponent that couldn't handle it. After taking a deep breath, he looked over at Misty and nodded before turning to Flint. "Well, I guess we're gonna head in then." The once more disguised man crossed his arms. "Right. Well, I'm ready when you are." With that, the boy looked up at his first Pokémon and smiled. "Ready, buddy." Pikachu nodded and sparked his cheeks energetically. Pika. Reaching out, Ash grabbed the door handles and then threw them open before stepping into the gym, Misty and Flint following behind him. As he walked inside, the black-haired boy looked around and found that the interior of the gym was quite plain inside. The walls were made of gray stone on the bottom, as a foundation, and metal the rest of the way up. The ceiling had a high arched design with metal beams supporting it, and on one side of the wall there was a large metal door that could be rolled up. Above that wall-length door there was an equally expansive stretch of windows that allowed sunlight to stream into the gym from outside. On both sides of the hangar-like room were catwalks risen high off the ground, and at the very back of the gym, elevated on a raised platform, was a flat sitting area surrounded by yellow rock. And sitting atop that platform was the same teenage boy Ash and Misty had seen nights earlier with Flint. While the boy was wearing the same tan pants, beige t-shirt and black belt they had seen before, he now had on a dark green vest with 4 pockets stitched onto both sides. He also now had 2 red pouches, one bigger than the other, clipped to his belt. On his feet were dark gray and white shoes. After spending a few moments looking around and taking in Brock's appearance, Ash heard the young gym leader speak and his voice echoed across the building. "Are you a trainer come to challenge my gym?" Ash straightened up and nodded firmly. "Yes. My name is Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town and I have come to challenge you, Brock." The boy stood up and raised an eyebrow. "So you already know who I am. Very well then." With that, he leapt down from the pedestal and held up 2 fingers. We shall each battle with 2 Pokémon. Forest. A few moments after Brock's command, they all suddenly heard the sound of a loud clicking, followed by the feeling of the very floor itself rumbling beneath their feet. Then, before their eyes, the floor in the middle of the gym started to separate and roll back like it was on a conveyor belt. Soon, from the large gaping hole that was left from the floor's vacancy, a huge rocky battlefield slowly ascended up out of the ground until it was set firmly in place. The Yellowstone arena had boulders of all sizes comprising its material surface, and it easily took up the largest portion of the inside of the gym. Once the shaking finally stopped and the battlefield was in place, a door to the right of Brock opened up and a boy looking identical to him came running out. The boy was obviously younger than Brock and his hair was just as spiky, if not a tad longer. He was wearing dark blue jeans and a dark and light green striped shirt. When Flint saw the boy, one of his sons, it took all he had not to reveal himself on the spot, but he managed to control his urge to do so. The young boy ran out to the right side of the battlefield and took his place just outside of it, his actions obviously having been rehearsed and repeated many times over. At the same time, another door opened on the catwalk to the left of the room, and from it came all of Brock's remaining brothers and sisters to see the upcoming battle. Misty could see Flint's whole body twitch when he saw the rest of his children appear, but to his credit, he didn't blow his cover yet. Though she could only imagine the self-control it was taking for him to keep his identity a secret after so long. Once everything was ready, Forrest stepped forward and called out, "This will be an official 2-on-2 match between the Pewter City Gym leader, Brock Stone, and the challenger, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. Both trainers will battle until either side's Pokémon are unable to battle. There is no time limit and only the challenger may substitute Pokémon. Trainers, choose your first contenders." With his little brothers and sisters cheering him on from above, Brock stepped forward and pulled a Pokeball out from inside of one of his vest pockets. Enlarging it, he reared back and then tossed the ball into the air. Geodude Goo. As the small, double-armed, floating hunk of rock appeared hovering above the battlefield with a grunt of, "Geo." Ash looked at Flint and Misty. "Good luck, young man," the secret father put a hand on his shoulder and then Misty smiled supportively. "You've got this, Ash, battle hard." Smiling and nodding to both of them, the boy stepped up into his trainer's box and looked up at Pikachu. "I think I'm gonna try someone else for this first battle, alright Pi." Chirping in understanding, the small yellow mouse hopped down beside of his trainer while Ash observed Geodude closely. Then, after a few seconds of deliberation, he made his choice. "Alright, let's see how this works. Geodude is a rock type, so I'll go with." Picking his selected Pokeball, he nodded to himself and then yelled, "Let's show 'em how far your training has got you, Mankey." As the capture device snapped open, the brutish and fight-loving primate appeared on the battlefield and raised his live, furry and strong arms up to chant, "Mank Mank, Mankey, Monkey." "A fighting type, huh?" Brock observed. "Well, at least you seem to know your basic type matchups." He then pointed. "Geodude, use rock throw. Mankey, dodge by flipping to the side." Ash called out quickly in response as the two-armed rock type formed and then tossed a large rock at his Pokémon. Mankey flipped out of the way just in time, but Brock was already giving another command. "Now use tackle." Geodude took off through the air at deceptively fast speeds for a Pokémon of its type, though Ash was prepared. "Mankey, slide under Geodude and then hit it with a mega kick while you're under it." The furry monkey acted fast and slid under Geodude just before the other Pokémon was about to connect with tackle. Then, while under it, he used Mega Kick to launch Brock's Pokémon high into the air. His trainer further capitalized on the move. "Great, now leap high in the air to meet Geodude and grab hold of it, then throw it back to the ground with seismic toss." Doing as told, the spunky fighting type jumped up high and met Geodude in the air before grabbing the rock Pokémon. Then, as they both fell, he started spinning it around before throwing the small but heavy rock type back toward the ground. Brock saw the danger incoming, however, and quickly called out, "Geodude. Use defense curl to tuck yourself into a ball and lessen the impact." The pre-evolved form of Golem curled into a tight sphere just before it hit the ground, which saved it from serious damage. It then rose back into the air quickly with only a few scrapes and bruises on its body. Geodude used Rock Slide. On its trainer's command, Geodude chanted its name while raising its arms skyward. As it did this, several small portals appeared above Mankey's head with large rocks falling from them. Once more though, Ash was ready. Mankey shatter all of those rocks with Brick Break. The boy found himself quite glad that he had trained his newest Pokémon so hard. Mankey had learned quite a few new fighting-type moves that were now proving their worth. Which was evidenced by the lively monkey jumping up and powerfully shattering each rock that fell with a well-timed series of brick breaks. Now, he shoved his arm out and pointed. Run at Geodude in zigzag patterns and then start hitting it with multiple karate chops. Then end it with Mega Punch. Taking off like a sprinter, Mankey began zipping toward Geodude in a weaving pattern that confused the rock type so badly, it couldn't react. When the fighting type finally got in range of Geodude, Brock could do nothing but watch as Mankey began assaulting his Pokémon with karate chop after karate chop. He then finished the brutal combo with a well-placed Mega Punch, which knocked Geodude back into a nearby rock and then down onto the ground. Frowning, Brock called to his Pokémon. Geodude, get up. Don't give up, you can do it. Opening its eyes with a groan, the battered rock type slowly floated back up and then focused its gaze on Mankey with determination in its eyes. At that very same moment, Geodude raised its arms and gave a loud cry of, "Geo-o! Duty!" Then, before all those watching, the hunk of rock started glowing bluish-white as it began evolving. Brock looked on at his Pokémon in surprise and Ash himself appeared to be in a similar state of mind as he thought to himself. Huh, now this is gonna be interesting. When Geodude was finally done evolving, a strong-looking Graveler had taken its place, now on 2 legs. And the 4-armed rock type announced its new form with a gruff-sounding, Graveler. Brock stood in shock at what had just happened for only a moment or two longer before he smiled at the change of events and then ordered his Pokémon, "Okay Graveler, use a continuous takedown attack." The newly evolved rock type bellowed fiercely before lowering its rocky body down and charging at Mankey like a steamroller. Acting swiftly, Ash shouted, "Mankey, start jumping from rock to rock to avoid Graveler." Moving on command, the agile little monkey began jumping from rock to rock that made up the battlefield. Graveler, for its part, was like a wrecking ball, smashing into and destroying each rock as it went, with ease. Unfortunately, Mankey eventually made a slip-up and tripped off of a rock, falling right into Graveler's path. With no lapse in intensity, the newly evolved Pokémon hit him hard and sent the fighting type flying into the air with a cry of, "Mankey!" Ash's Pokémon soon fell back to the ground, landing hard, and then Brock ordered Graveler to continue hitting Mankey with takedown. Over and over again he was slammed into and tossed around ruthlessly before he was finally sent careening into a nearby boulder. Upon impact, he smashed the rock to pieces and lay there in a pile of shattered pebbles, very dazed. "Come on Mankey, you can do it. Get up and show them what true strength is." Ash cheered loudly while Pikachu did the same down next to him. "Pikachu!" Hearing the words of encouragement, Mankey regained his wits and then slowly got back up. As he did he began fuming in anger, the veins around his face and forehead became visible, even through the fur, and his eyes actually turned red. Seeing the change in his Pokémon's appearance but knowing immediately from the signs what it was, Ash realized that his newest Pokémon had just activated one of his 3 abilities, Anger Point. Knowing it was their chance for a turnaround, the boy shouted, "Mankey! Wait until Graveler gets right on top of you and then jump into the air." Even though Anger Point had come into effect, the ability hadn't taken so strong a hold that Mankey was unable to act with reason. Thus, because of this, the angry Pokémon did as he was told and waited until Graveler was right on top of him before jumping high into the air like a real primate. This sudden, swift move ended up causing the still charging rock Pokémon to ram itself accidentally straight into a boulder. There, it hit the rock and, like a car striking a speeding train, its momentum was efficiently stopped. Smirking, Ash yelled. Now get in close to Graveler and start using Karate Chop, Fury Swipes and Mega Punch. Brock saw the danger his Pokémon was soon to be in and he urgently attempted to avoid it. Graveler, try and get up. Hurry. The rock type heard its trainer but could not move due to one of its arms being stuck inside of the rock it had struck. Mankey, seeing his chance, moved quickly and got right up on the inside of Graveler, between it and the rock. From there, he began delivering a punishing onslaught of combination attacks that all struck the rock type dead on each time. The evolved form of Geodude cried out in pain as it was struck repeatedly by Mankey's powerful blows, Karate Chop, Fury Swipes and Mega Punch. Brock himself knew that there was only one way out now, and it was a tactic he hated using. The current match was pushing him to his limits and he needed to act fast. Graveler, use self-destruct. Ash heard the hasty and last-ditch attack being called for, but he couldn't say anything before Graveler was quickly consumed in a blinding white light that soon exploded with a thunderingly loud boom, shrouding both it and Mankey from the eruption that came. After the loud and powerful explosion, everyone in the gym waited with bated breath as the smoke cleared and the dust settled. When it did, it showed Graveler laying unconscious in a small hole created by the force of the blast. What really surprised everyone though was Ash's Pokémon. Mankey was still standing where he had been prior to the explosion. He was covered in smoke and dust and was badly battered and bruised, though he remained upright. Fortunately, the blast had shaken him out of anger pointed and was part of the reason he was still standing, albeit barely, and his breathing came in heavy pants. Brock's little brother Forrest saw that Graveler was unconscious and went to raise his arm while saying, "Graveler is Una," however, he was stopped short by Mankey suddenly going down to both knees before he fell to the ground unconscious as well. Blinking at the turn of events, he rephrased his wording quickly and continued. "Both Pokémon are unable to battle, that means the leader and challenger are now down to their last contestants. Trainers, please choose your final Pokémon." Ash smiled and recalled Mankey into his Pokeball. "You did a great job, Mankey, thank you so much. Very few Pokémon could stay standing for so long after an attack like that." Accepting the outcome of their first battle, Brock returned Graveler to its ball and then smiled at it. "Thanks, Graveler, you did a great job. Now take a nice rest." Afterward, the squinty-eyed teen pulled out his last Pokeball while thinking to himself with a nervous sweat drop. "Man, this kid is good. My Geodude evolved into Graveler and his Mankey still ended up practically beating him. If I hadn't made him use self-destruct, then his Pokémon would still be standing and Graveler would be out regardless." After a few moments of internal reflection, he enlarged and then threw the ball containing his last battler with a loud shout of, "Onyx! Let's go!" As the small Pokeball snapped open high in the air, it released from within the truly massive form of one of the biggest species of Pokémon found, especially in Kanto. Its long, imposing and rocky body looked hard and powerful enough to tangle with a semi-truck, but its somewhat serpentine shape made for a very unique contrast. Fully appearing on the battlefield in all its dynamic glory, the rock snake Pokémon released a loud bellow of, "Unix." Misty recoiled back when she saw the huge Pokémon and then nervously advised from her place on the sidelines. "Be careful, Ash. That looks like one powerful Pokémon." Glancing back at her, he grinned and gave his worried friend a thumbs up. "Don't worry, Misty, this match is well on its way to being over, trust me." The slightly older girl furrowed in brow confusion at his strange statement, but she nodded anyway, trusting his judgment and hoping that he really did have something planned. With his piece spoken, the black-haired boy knelt down to Pikachu's level and smiled at him. "I'm sorry, buddy, I'd like to use you for this last battle, but I think you need to do a little more training before we have you fight. Just to make sure your electrical attacks are really under control again." "Do you think he's ready for this though, like we talked about earlier?" Understanding his trainer on both counts, the lively electric type nodded and then held his arms out. "Pika Pikachu. Pika Pi Pikachu." The young rookie grinned at the response he received. "You're right, buddy, I think he is ready." Ash then stood up before turning and drawing another Pokeball from his belt. He then enlarged it while calling out, "Hey Brock. This has been a great battle and you and your Pokémon have done a great job, but it ends here. The older boy raised his eyebrow. Well, let's see what you've got then, or if it's all just big talk. Smirking, the messy-haired trainer threw the ball while yelling, "All right, let's win this match." With those words spoken, the Pokeball snapped open and out came a small, purple and rodent Pokémon. Rat Rattata. What? Misty screeched loudly as she saw Ash's Rattata materialize on the field. You're using Rattata, a normal type, against Onix, a rock type. Ash, what's wrong with you? The boy merely waved his hand back to calm her down. Misty, chill would ya? I have a plan. You don't think I'd just send Rattata out there with no strategy in mind, do you? Come on. The orange-haired girl gawked at him disbelievingly and then shook her head. I really hope you do know what you're doing or this match is gonna be over. The raven-haired boy winked over his shoulder and gave her a thumbs up. Watch and learn, Misty. You're about to see the benefits of hard training firsthand. He then turned back to the matter at hand and looked down at Rattata. You ready, buddy? In reply, he quickly got a very enthusiastic affirmation from the small, big-toothed rat. Rattata. He smiled proudly at his Pokemon's determination and then looked over at Forest, who apparently got the hint as he held both hands up and yelled. Trainers ready. Go. With the green flag proverbially given, Ash ordered his Pokémon before Brock could even open his mouth. Rattata, use quick attack and get up to Onix as fast as you can. From there, you know what to do. He had a whole strategy planned out and he knew all about Onix. Once he found out that Brock had won after using the internet earlier in the week to research him for the match, Ash immediately began training Rattata for the upcoming strategy they were about to use. The small but fast normal type started running in a blur of speed until he was soon leaping across the pointy rock spires dotting the battlefield. Brock didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't going to wait to find out. Thus, he commanded Onix to begin sweeping the entire battlefield with its tail to try and hit Rattata. The mouse Pokémon wasn't about to be deterred from his target, however, and jumped up on top of the rock snake Pokémon's rocky tail. From there, he got around on the rock type's other side, bypassing its defenses and attacks entirely. The squinty-eyed gym leader didn't know why, but he had a strange feeling that was telling him not to let Rattata do whatever it was planning. Onix, dive bomb it with your head. Hurry. As quick as the large Pokémon could, it smashed its head down into the ground right where Rattata had just been standing. A dust cloud was kicked up by the attack and no one could see the outcome of the strike. Brock himself felt certain that Onix had hit his target. He felt confident that there was no way a small Pokémon like Rattata could have endured such a crushing attack from a far larger opponent. With that thought in mind, he spoke on it. Well, Ash, you battled hard, but it looks like I win. Better luck next time. He didn't say it, but battling the black-haired boy had been one of the toughest matches he ever fought. If only the rookie in question would have been a little better on who he had chosen as his last Pokémon, it very well might have ended quite differently. Forrest was smirking at his brother's supposed win, Brock's other siblings were cheering, Flint hung his head remorsefully at his lost chance to reconnect with his family, and Misty herself seemed distraught at Ash's loss. The strangest thing, however, was that when she looked at him, he didn't have the look of someone who had just lost. Instead, he had the look of someone in deep concentration and focus. Pikachu also seemed to have his eyes locked onto the slowly dissipating dust cloud that was obscuring Onix and Rattata from sight. Misty seemed confused until she looked toward the hazy cloud as well. At last, when the dust finally cleared, everyone's expressions took a turn of absolute shock. All except Ash, for that was, who had the widest grin on his face possible. It soon became very clear that Rattata was nowhere to be seen. Where the small Pokémon should have been, which was laying unconscious in the crater that Onix had left with its head, he was not. The diminutive rat had quite literally disappeared without a trace. Misty spoke on the unusual turn of events first. Where did Rattata go? He's not trapped under Onix, is he? Her voice had turned panicky by that point and Brock himself seemed worried too. The older boy was just about to have his Pokémon move so that they could see if Rattata really was trapped under Onix's heavy body or not when Ash began to do something that made them all look at him as if he were crazy. He chuckled. Hee, I'm sorry to say this, Brock, but you just lost the match. Everyone still stared at him like he really had lost his mind. Brock began to think that maybe the young trainer was in denial and just couldn't accept that he had lost. That his inability to face reality was now causing him to spout off nonsense. Ash, what are you saying? Are you okay? Misty asked of her friend in concern, worry for him now truly setting in. Yes son, it's okay to admit you lost, there's no shame in it. Flint tried to say consolingly even though his own hopes felt dashed to pieces. The boy finished chuckling to himself and then finally looked back at them. I'm better than okay, you too. And here in a second, you'll see why. The small watching crowd still remained oblivious to the meaning of his words until he pointed up at Onix and shouted. Now Rattata. Brock, Misty, Flint, Forest and the rest of the stone children all looked toward Onix and saw nothing happening. Misty, eventually, went to break the silence by asking, Ash, what or why, but that was all she managed to say. At that very same moment, Onix started writhing around in what seemed like pain. Twisting and turning, it thrashed its large body around like mad while bellowing in apparently agonizing torture. Oni X. Uni X. OOON Unix. The massive rock-type Pokémon continued thrashing and flailing itself around the entire battlefield without control. Onix was swinging its tail like a rocky whip and its head was being flung around wildly, crashing into and destroying almost every rock on the field. Brock, perplexed at what was happening, tried to intervene. Onix, what's wrong? Stop this. Stop it now. The distressed rock serpent didn't hear its trainer though and continued to thrash around with reckless abandon. It then began smashing its head into the gym floor, over and over again, bellowing in pain the entire time. Everyone but Ash just stood and stared in undisguised shock at what they were seeing. The young man had a calm and cool look on his face as he watched the scene unfold. Brock, on the other hand, stood where he was, mouth practically agape and unable to do anything to help his Pokémon. All he could do was watch it beat itself into oblivion. Finally, at long last, Onix stopped banging its head into the floor and raised itself back up to full height, now looking exceedingly battered and heavily damaged. After a few seconds it gave one weak call of, Unix, before falling to the ground, unconscious, with swirls in its eyes. Everyone in the gym was utterly dumbstruck at what had just occurred. Then, all of a sudden, a small purple body came jumping out from between the boulders that made up Onix's stony body. Seeing this, they all stared blankly as Rattata ran back across the battlefield and came to stand in front of Ash. He then turned around and faced down the unconscious Onix, not so much as one scratch on him. Misty, of everyone, eventually managed to stutter out, Ash. Rattata, what just happened? Smiling proudly at what had just happened, Ash took a moment to revel in the unexpected outcome before he crossed his arms and started to explain. Well, I studied about Pokémon for quite a few years before my journey began. And in that time, I learned a lot about Pokémon. Naturally, I also learned about Onix. At that, he looked toward Brock. So, when I found out you used an Onix, Brock, it was just a simple matter of finding the best strategy to beat it. They may be extremely tough Pokémon on the outside with their rock skin, but, just like with many other rock types, their internal anatomy is extremely vulnerable and sensitive. The intelligent young trainer pointed down at his victorious Pokémon. I taught Rattata that he could get inside of Onix by going through the spaces between the boulders on his body. Once he got inside, Rattata started tackling, biting and hammering away at Onix's soft inner tissues. That's what caused it to writhe around in so much pain and begin beating itself up. He then gestured at Brock's unconscious Pokémon. Onix wanted Rattata out of it and was willing to do anything to make that happen. It started beating itself up so badly that Rattata didn't even have to fight it head to head. He just attacked it from the inside, which caused Onix to beat itself into unconsciousness, allowing Rattata to stay safe inside of it all the while. Ash shrugged. As for me, I was able to just stay back and wait while Onix defeated itself. I admit I was a little concerned there at first that it had hit Rattata with that head smash earlier, but it just wasn't fast enough. Rattata is super quick and really agile. So, there you have it, my strategy in a nutshell. Everyone was totally silent and had nothing whatsoever to say for a short while after he finished explaining. Eventually, Misty became capable of murmuring only one word. Wow, that was totally genius. He rubbed the back of his head awkwardly and smiled. Well, I really got the idea from reading stories about how the same thing happens to Onix in the wild. Smaller Pokémon are always getting lodged inside of them when they're out tunneling. If that happens, Onix feels a lot of pain and can even be set off into a terrible rage if the problem isn't quickly resolved. Ash held up his hand. Professional league trainers are usually called out to subdue the situation and help remove the smaller Pokémon from inside of Onix. That's where I really got the idea from. I just implemented it into a sound strategy that can be used against any Onix in battle if you have a small enough Pokémon to do the job, like Rattata. While everyone processed what they had just been told, he went up to Rattata and knelt down. You did a great job, buddy, and I'm really proud of you. You pulled off that strategy perfectly, and I can tell that all of your training is really paying off. Give it a few years and you'll become one heck of a powerful Pokémon. Smiling, he pointed towards the defeated Onix. You took down that huge Pokémon and it easily makes up 100 or more of you. You should feel very proud of yourself, Rattata. I know I am. The small purple rodent beamed proudly at his trainer's praise. Rattata, Rattata. However, right at that very same moment, a look of confusion passed across his face before, suddenly, he started to glow and slowly change shape. Ash instantly knew what was happening and smiled brightly. Hey, alright, Rattata, you're evolving. After a few seconds of transforming within the bright light, the process of evolution finally ended and left a larger, taller Pokémon in place of Rattata. One in which announced its new identity to its trainer with a gruff-sounding, "Rattacate." Grinning from ear to ear, Ash pulled out his Pokédex and scanned his newly evolved Pokémon. Pokédex entry number 020. Rattacate, the mouse Pokémon. Its whiskers are essential for maintaining its balance. No matter how friendly you are, it will get angry and bite you if you touch its whiskers. Its hind feet are also webbed. They act as flippers, so it can swim in rivers and hunt for prey. This Pokémon is male and knows the moves: Headbutt, Quick Attack, Hyper Fang, Focus Energy, Pursuit and Scary Face. After the readout was done, he put his Pokédex away and then began rubbing his evolved Pokémon on top of the head while smiling again. Well, Rattacate, it looks like you just got one step closer to becoming super strong someday. Rattacate clicked his long teeth happily at his trainer's praise and then jumped up into his arms. Ratty. Even Pikachu congratulated his fellow rodent-kin by waving his arms around and cheering, "Pikachu pie Pikachu." After he finished congratulating and hugging Rattacate, Ash let him down and then stood up and looked at Brock, who had just now returned his Onix. The defeated gym leader looked over at Forrest and his younger brother seemed to get the message. Therefore, the boy finally broke free from his shocked stupor that his big brother had been defeated in such an unorthodox manner and did his job as referee. Raising his hand, he pointed in the direction of Ash and Rattacate. Since the gym leader's Pokémon are all unable to battle, the victory hereby goes to Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town and his Rattacate. The young, victorious rookie broke out into a quick moment of cheering celebration with Pikachu and Rattacate while Misty, and even Flint, joined in by clapping and congratulating them. Especially the latter, who knew that his time had almost come. Great job, Ash, you did it. You and your Pokémon were amazing. Misty gushed proudly of her friend. I agree, young man, Flint began. That was a very exciting and incredible match to watch. You and your Pokémon worked like a real team and your strategies were unique and very effective. Nice work. It was after they were done celebrating that a happily smiling Ash looked over to see Brock walking up to meet him. Ash, the older boy began. That was, without a doubt, the best match I have ever had. You used some amazing and off-the-wall strategies I never would have imagined, and you worked with your Pokémon incredibly well." The spiky-haired teen smiled. "You were like stone, sturdy and immovable. I learned so much from battling you, and for that alone, I am very grateful. With all that said, I believe you have earned this fair and square, no questions asked." Brock then held up a shiny silver badge that was shaped a little bit like a boulder. As he presented it, the boy smiled and held it out between two fingers. "Ash, I hereby give to you the boulder badge. This is official proof that you defeated my gym in the eyes of the Pokémon League and is one of 8 badges needed to compete in next year's Indigo League conference." Ash slowly reached out and took the badge before holding it up so that Pikachu and Raticate could see it better. "Well guys, we just took our first step toward the Indigo League." Pikachu smiled and pumped his small fist, chanting, "Pika Pi Pi Pikachu." While Raticate I smiled and did the same. Raticate Kate Raticate. The boy then knelt down and opened up his backpack before pulling out, from the main section, a silver-plated badge case that looked like a square metal box and had different designs on it. The case had an insignia etched into its surface for every type of Pokémon there was, such as fire, grass, water and flying, only to name a few. The inside of the case was quite large and was covered in fine red, velvet lining that would mold to each badge, keeping them in place. It had been yet another gift from his mother. The victorious young trainer placed his first badge into the case, on the red felt covering, and then put it away before standing back up to face the gym leader again. "Thank you Brock, that was a great match." The older boy shook his head. "No Ash, thank you. You showed me so much in that match and reminded me of just how many things I still have to learn about Pokémon." Brock paused for a second and looked away, staring out one of the big windows of the gym. "You know, I've never really cared much about Pokémon battling and making my own stronger just to fight. I've always loved taking care of Pokémon and grooming them, making them the healthiest they can be. My dream isn't to be a gym leader like I am right now. I want to become the world's best Pokémon breeder." He then turned solemn. "But I'll never realize that dream. Ever since my mother died and my father left to go on his own Pokémon journey, I was left here to take care of my younger brothers and sisters. They count on me and I could never leave them." At that very same moment, the door near the back of the gym, the same one Forrest had come through, was flung open and all of Brock's remaining siblings came running out. "Big brother! Big brother!" They all seemed to cry in unison as they ran to the teenager and surrounded him. Altogether, each one seemed to grasp at a different part of his body while pleading, "No big brother, you can't lose. Yeah, that battle wasn't fair. That boy must have cheated somehow. We know how much you love your Pokémon, he shouldn't have hurt them." Ash and Misty blinked and stared in confusion at the display they were seeing. Brock, though, just smiled in amusement and knelt down. "All right you guys, listen up." He began softly and patiently. "I know you're upset and I feel really flattered, but nothing bad happened and Ash didn't cheat. This was an official gym match and he beat me fair and square. He was just the better trainer today. And besides, don't you worry about my Pokémon, they'll be fine after a quick trip to the center in town." Their confusion was replaced with warmness in their hearts as Ash and Misty observed the scene before them. A scene of several concerned children coming to the aid of their beloved big brother when they thought he had been unfairly treated. However, even though the kids seemed placated somewhat by Brock's words, the moment didn't last as Flint finally stepped forward. Too moved at seeing all of his children so close to be able to keep it to himself anymore. "No Brock, you listen to me," the older man spoke as everyone looked toward him. "I want you to go out and achieve your dream. I owe you that much at least and so much more." With that said, he removed the beard and hat from his head, which immediately caused Forrest to gasp and Brock to shoot to his feet. "Dad," the younger boy stammered. Is that really you?" Brock's younger brother and sisters appeared incredibly confused as they looked from Forrest to Flint while the latter nodded. "Yes, it's me son." The acting referee stared in awe at the man standing before them, but Brock simply glared hard at Flint with furrowed eyebrows. Ash and Misty both stepped back, feeling it best for them to take a rear seat for now. Finally, After several long moments of silence, the eldest of the stone children spoke and his voice was harsh. "What are you doing here?" Expecting such a reaction from his oldest son, Flint replied without breaking eye contact with his child. "I know how you feel about seeing me right now, Brock. You hate me and you have every right." One of the smaller children looked up at him and spoke in wonder. "Daddy." Though just before stepping forward, Brock held his hand out to stop the little girl, Cindy. "You abandoned us," he stated flatly without looking away from his father. "You left us for 2 years and we never heard anything from you, not even after Mom died. Why in the world should I welcome you here?" Flint remained calm. "You don't have a reason to. And honestly, if you told me to get out and never come back, I wouldn't blame you. There is absolutely no excuse I can give to make things right." The wayward parent held an arm out. "I could tell you that I left to go on my journey with hopes of entering and winning the Indigo Conference. That I was hoping I could take that prize money and then come back home and start a better life for all of us. That I did what I did with the best of intentions." He then frowned. "But none of it would matter. Because the fact of the matter is," he gestured at himself, "I screwed up. After your mother passed away I should have come straight home to take care of you kids, but I didn't." Brock demanded forcefully. "Yeah, and why didn't you?" Flint finally broke gazes as he looked down at the ground. "I could tell you that I stayed away because I heard you had become a gym leader and were providing better for our family than I ever thought I could. I can say that I came back home and stayed in this area for a whole year without contacting you because I wanted to train my Pokémon to become stronger. That I wanted to reveal myself to you only once I was good enough to take the gym from you and start being the responsible father I always should have been. So that you could finally start out on your own journey and fulfill your dreams." Flint looked back up. "But that would still be an excuse. The fact is, regardless of what I told myself, and no matter how much any of it may be true, I was scared above all else. I was scared none of you would accept me. I was scared you would blame me for your mother's death and for everything that's happened, even though you'd be totally right to do so. I was simply too scared and cowardly to come back and do what I should have been doing all along, and that's the real truth. I have been hiding away and shirking my responsibilities like a pathetic loser, and I can admit that with far greater shame than I hope you ever have to experience yourself." Flint held his hand out. "The fact is, Brock, you would call me a loser, a worthless father and a coward, and you would be right on every single count. And every day for 2 years I have wallowed in my own misery and hated myself beyond any hope of conciliation. Laying awake most nights loathing myself. The truth is," he gestured at Ash finally, "I am here today because of this young man." Brock and the others looked toward the boy, who froze up awkwardly, while Flint continued. "I met Ash earlier this week when he told me that he planned on challenging you." The older man gave a small smile. "I admit, at first I was skeptical. I thought he was just another dewy-eyed rookie. But then I watched him train and afterward I actually battled him myself. And when I did I learned something." Flint nodded. "He was the real deal. He wasn't just some loudmouth with no talent to back it up. This boy had both the skill and the determination to do what he said. Unlike me, a hopeless fool when I first started out, this kid had his act together. He was firm, well organized, smart, and he possessed a bond with his Pokémon that I could never hope to match." He then looked back at his son. "In short, Ash taught me what it was like to be bold and courageous. He taught me the shameful error of my cowardly ways, and he made me realize how unforgivably foolish I have been." Flint gestured at the boy in question again, who now seemed rather embarrassed by all the praise. "Ash taught me what it really means to face your fears and not hide yourself away in shame and regret. Meeting and battling this kid taught me that I needed to stand up and act like the man I should have been behaving as all along." At that, Ash finally spoke himself. "Brock, your dad told me and Misty about everything to do with your family. He also told us that if I defeated you, he was going to finally reveal himself to you guys and try to make amends for the mistakes he's made." Misty nodded and looked at the older boy. "Yeah, Brock, trust me, I know how you must feel. I was upset at your dad initially when he told us everything too. But, When he told us how much he wanted to make things right and correct the mistakes he made with all of you, I was able to respect him for that. It isn't easy and I know how scary it must be for him. Ash chimed in again. I hope you're not mad at us as well, Brock, but we did what we felt was right too. Your family has really suffered and if anything we could do would help fix that, we wanted to do our part. Flint stepped forward. Listen son, you have every reason to hate me and no reason to forgive me. I know what I did was terrible and I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. The fact is though, he gestured at all of the other children. This is my family and I am their father. I failed them before but I don't want to fail anymore. I want to right the mistakes I've made and be the father I always should have been. I want to make it up. To you, to your brothers and sisters, and to your mother. Brock was totally silent and unmoving when Flint reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. He stared at his father with a solid gaze while the equally firm man spoke bluntly but truthfully. Brock, you're a talented Pokémon trainer, more so than I could ever hope to be. Your skills though will only get you so far in this gym, here in this town. You deserve to stretch your wings and go out into the world. To test yourself, grow and become whatever your heart desires. You deserve a chance to achieve your own dreams. He then patted his own chest. Let me be the father to my children I always should have been and make it up to you in the only way I can. Let me take care of my family as is my responsibility and allow yourself to have the freedom you've more than earned. You have done more than you ever should have had to do, Brock. Let me take over from here as I should have long ago. The young man looked at his father intently for a time before he slowly looked away to the side. After everything, after all the time you've been gone, I don't know if I can trust you now. I've raised and looked after my own brothers and sisters for 2 years. I've kept this whole family going by myself and I just don't know if I can trust you to take care of them. Flint nodded and looked down. I know how you feel. I understand. You have every right to feel this way. After a few seconds, Forrest suddenly spoke up. Hey, can I please say something? Everyone looked at him and he then glanced toward Flint. I may have been younger than Brock was when Dad left but I do remember why he did. It may not have been right what he did in being gone all this time and I won't excuse how he acted in staying away for so long but. At that, he looked at Brock. Big brother, Mom is gone. I know you've done the best you can to take care of us and you've done a great job but as hard as you try, you can't take the place of Mom or Dad. And you have a life you have to live with dreams of your own. You can't achieve them staying here looking after us. The young man looked at his father again. Dad may have made a mistake but he's realized it and now he's trying to make it right. To me, that means a lot, way more than if he would have just stayed away. I think we should give him a chance. Flint appeared taken aback by his younger son's words while the other children started to slowly speak up, one after the other. Is that really Daddy? I've missed Daddy. Dad, did you really come back to take care of us? Can Daddy stay? Please don't go away again, Daddy. Dad, I forgive you for leaving, I'm just glad you're back again. Brock looked amongst his siblings and listened to their words before he focused his gaze on Flint again. Finally, he slowly approached his father and stopped just a few inches from him. I'm not going to say that it will be easy to forgive you or forget what you did. He began slowly. But I want the same thing you do. I just want what's best for our family and if you're really back to be the father that you say you want to be then I can support that. A gleam of hope entered Flint's squinty eyes as, at long last, a small smile crested Brock's lips. So with that said, welcome home, Dad. The long-missing father felt his heart grow warm with affection and relief as his oldest son finally accepted him home. And with that came the breaking of the floodgates as Forrest and all of the other children rushed their returned parent and quite literally tackled him to the ground. Before he knew what was happening, Flint found himself getting tightly embraced and hugged by all of his children, who were cheering excitedly over his return. As he was glomped and practically mobbed by his enthusiastically pleased children, the shock eventually faded and gave way to a breakdown of emotions. With tears now in his eyes, the reformed father embraced all of his children back just as tightly, kissing each one and holding them as if he were afraid to let go. All while his tears flowed down his cheeks in joy. Laughter, the first in years, came from his mouth. It was a gravelly and rough sound, but there was no mistaking its joyful and exuberant undertone. As he hugged, he laughed, and the joy he felt at being reunited with all of his children, who were now swarming him, could be seen and felt by everyone else. Seeing this, Brock smiled. Though he knew it would take time before he could fully forgive his father, seeing the joy on his little siblings' faces as they reunited with their long-lost parent was more than worth it to him. And seeing the visible joy and relief on Flint's face as he tearfully embraced and greeted each of his children made Brock believe that his father was really sincere after all. Ash and Pikachu were watching the heartwarming moment with smiles of their own, and even Misty was in the same position. Though she did have a little wetness in the eyes that showed she too was moved by the intimate reunion. Eventually, Brock looked over at the two visitors and he wiped a hand over his own eyes as well. While he may not have felt comfortable enough yet to show affection toward his father, seeing the sheer happiness of his beloved little siblings did manage to touch him in his heart. "Well, Ash," the older boy began, "if what both of you and my father says is true, then I suppose I have you to thank for this happening." The boy in question looked at Misty and then back at Brock before modestly smiling and shaking his head. "Aw, come on, I didn't do much, Brock." It sounded like he was waiting to do this anyway. It could have been anybody. Flint finally managed to stand back up after his children let him go, and when he did, he was holding one of the little girls in his arms, Susie. Looking at Ash, he smiled and shook his head. "No, Ash, I do have you to thank. We all do." All the kids old enough to understand seemed to look at Ash in a different light, with gratitude and appreciation, as Flint went on. "You helped give me the courage and the resolve to finally reunite with my family, Ash. You and Misty. If it wasn't for you two, none of this would have happened." This time they both turned a little red at the praise while Brock smiled. "Well, Ash, and you too, Misty, I want you both to know how grateful I am. You two helped give us back our family and I'll be forever indebted to you for that. You're more than a talented trainer, Ash, you've proven yourself to be a good person. And that to me speaks more about you than battling ever could." He then looked toward Misty. "And thank you, Misty, for supporting all this and being willing to help if Ash couldn't. I never would have expected this sort of kindness from two complete strangers I never met before." Before either one could respond, Flint looked over at his son. "I have an idea then, Brock. Since they're on a journey anyway, why not go with them?" The vest-wearing teen looked at his father in surprise. "What? I can't do that, Dad. I have to stay here and run the gym and help you take care of the kids." Flint shook his head. "No you don't, son, I'm here now. It's my responsibility and mine alone to take care of my family, and that is exactly what I plan on doing now. And as for the gym, I'll work at becoming certified to replace you as soon as you leave." He looked down at his children and smiled. "I have enough money that I've saved up from my rock business over the last year to take care of things until the league gets me certified. Trust me, son, I can handle this." Ash, for his part, spoke up in a carefree manner. "I'd be more than happy to have you along with us, Brock, more the merrier." "Right, Misty?" The orange-haired girl smiled and nodded. "Yeah, Brock, why don't you come along with us?" The young man still seemed undecided until Forrest spoke up too. "Big brother, I think you should do it. You've always taken care of us, now it's your turn to go out and make your dreams come true." Brock remained silent for a time and said nothing at all for the longest while. He postulated and considered the decision before him with deep thought and scrutiny before, finally, he looked at Ash and Misty and smiled. "You know what? Sure, why not? As long as you two really don't mind, then I'd love to come along with you." Both younger trainers quickly reaffirmed their commitment to the offer with Ash grinning. "Of course we don't mind. Right, Pikachu?" He looked to his shoulder where Pikachu had climbed back up, and the small electric type smiled cheerfully before looking at Brock and nodding. "Pikachu pie." Misty gave a small laugh. "It'll be fun having someone else along. I can already tell traveling with Ash is gonna be one interesting experience." The spiky-haired teen shared in the laugh as he placed his hands on his hips. "Yes, somehow I can see that too just from our match. However, He quickly turned serious again after that light-hearted moment and looked back at his father. The intensity on his face was only matched by his voice when he opened his mouth to speak. "I'll go and do this, but before I do, there are just a couple of things you should know." Flint nodded and put his daughter down before replying somberly. "I'm sure there are a lot of things about me you want to say and get off your chest, so go ahead son, I'm listening." He was fully expecting a long list of complaints and maybe even an emotional speech from his son about how he had walked out on them and been gone for so long. However, his face showed his surprise when, instead of that, Brock reached into his pocket and pulled out a needle and thread, which he gave to his father. What's this?" Flint began to question just before his eldest child started rattling off, rapidly, a long list of things that needed to be done for all the rest of the children. "Susie always rips her dresses, so you better learn how to sew, and Timmy only eats eggs made sunny side up for breakfast with slightly burnt toast. Tommy hates red meat, so whatever you make for dinner or any other meal better have some light meat in it." In the midst of Brock's ramblings, Flint was jolted into action and quickly reached into his pants pocket, where he produced a pen and pad of paper, which he always carried with him when he went looking for new rock inventory. Then, while quickly beginning to scribble down all his son was telling him, so as not to forget anything, he pleaded desperately. "Slow down son, slow down. I can't write that fast." However, undeterred, and perhaps to even help his father prepare to look after 9 children of various ages, Brock kept going a mile a minute. "Cindy sleepwalks, so you have to tie a bell on her wrist before bed. Billy and Tilly never want to take a bath, so you have to get them right before bedtime when they're tired. Yolanda likes to go shopping on the weekends, so you better make time, and I've caught Salvadore and Forrest trying to take the child block off the computer before, so keep an eye on them. Now when it comes to the gym and the house, you need to." Ash and Misty both watched Brock continue to offload the list of responsibilities Flint would be inheriting while the older man sweated and wrote as fast as he could. In amusement, she looked at him and asked, "Think Flint can handle all that?" Ash shared an amused grin with her and chuckled. "I don't know, but I guess he'll find out after the first week." The two of them then turned their attention back to the scene playing out before them, and even though it was comedic, there was still a happy and cheerful undertone to be felt in the atmosphere, since a long fractured family had finally been made whole. Whether or not Flint would rise to the occasion of taking on such massive responsibilities so that Brock could follow his dreams remained to be seen. However, by the determined and focused expression he maintained while writing down everything Brock was saying, nodding and asking questions all the while, it definitely seemed that he had enough love for his children to become whatever he needed to be. And that was more reassurance than anything else could give.